here we are, back at the sink for another honing session with this lovely Heljestrand and our penguin friends. Let me move those guys out of the way, put them up there, safekeeping. And yes, we have this back. All right, remember this from the last video. So this has been through the mill at this point. You got spine wear up the wazoo. A little bit of width loss. Well, significant, I guess. But, and this is a big but, we got bevel. So, all of the rot that was holding me up, well, holding up the edge, in here, right? All of that devil spit that had like caked up onto the steel there and had munched its way into the bevel and cut through. Then I had bevel, but I still had pitting, and I cut through that. And I did that on, well, I used the 120, I used 600. You know, I had a 220 out for a while. A lot of coarse stones. I don't like doing that work. So what I try to do to alleviate some of the problems using a coarse stone will leave you with, got to remember, if you have a stone, like even this, I think 11 microns, but you have some 1Ks or 14 microns, that's your average particle size. You could have 25 micron particles in there too. So if you have something that's like literally 30 microns, I mean, you're going to have some boulders in there, and they leave gouges, and they leave a lot of rogue scratches. So I try to not do all the work in one stage on one of those coarse stones. I stop about halfway. So by stopping halfway, two things happen. The next stone, being finer, is going to remove a lot of those, all of those rogue scratches. It's going to leave its own, but they're going to be finer than what came before it. Rogue scratches from a 120 are serious. You throw a 220 down, still serious, but less serious. So I could do all of the work on the 120, but then I have all this massive work to clean up. So if I go halfway, 220 comes in, does a lot of cleanup. But what it does is it creates longer time, more work on the stone. And that is just something that, you know, I don't mind dealing with. Like if I have a chip, I don't hone the whole thing out on a 600 or a 400 or 200. I'll go halfway or 2/3 of the way. Then I'll do the last part on a 1K, right? So what happens is by the time the bevel comes up and meets the apex of the curve in the chip, and you create actually a bevel that you can shave with, you don't have any cleanup work to do because you already did it. So it's a pretty good thing. It's a pretty good thing, but it takes a lot longer. And that's just part of it for me. That's why when people say, oh, I want to bread knife things, I don't bread knife anything. I just, to me, I've done it a couple of times and there's really no point. Use a coarse stone, hone it out. People are like, oh, go on a 45. Well, I could go back and forth with this until the cows come home, and I might actually do that just to entertain myself. But the reality is, if you have X amount of steel to come off, it doesn't matter if you do it, you know, spine down or 45 halfway through the chip and then the rest. It doesn't matter. You still have to remove the same amount of steel. You might get a little more speed because you can apply pressure on that angled bread knife, but I don't know. I do like to keep the bevel angle where it was supposed to be, so honing it out on the stone, to me, always seems to be a more sensible type of thing. People get scared when it comes to spine wear. I'm sure there are people who have seen this blade and they're like talking behind my back somewhere, talking about the horrible spine wear job that I'm doing, and it's like, dude, you really need to get over that shit. It's a fucking razor. No one's coming into your bathroom to inspect your spine wear. A bit of a stutter there. I don't know what happened. I think the spine dragged on the dry part of the stone. Let me put a little water up here. Yeah, that's what happened. Alright, so why am I here? If I had bevel. After the 2,000 laps or whatever it took to get this thing into good steel, I honed for a little bit on this 1K and inspected my work, and it looked good. There was still some, what do you want to call it, a lack of uniformity along the curve of the edge. So I'm going to keep honing here so that line comes into its own. Now I know what you're thinking. Why don't you join the edge? Well, this isn't a chisel, and I'm not at a finishing step. So let's just say I wanted to like drag this through the corner of the stone to like level it off, and then I'm going to come back to this stone and I'm going to hone on this stone, and then I'm going to draw that line in. It's going to be the same thing. This whole joining the edge thing, it's just more forum fodder for people to sound good. The only time anyone in the shaving community got me to like sort of raise an eyebrow and like sort of buy into it was when they were working with the Shapton Glassstone 16K, and we had a little bit of a discussion, and his thing was if he honed like to 10K or 12K and then went to 16K and then he stropped and he shaved, he would have a little bit of bite, a little bit of roughness, a little bit of harshness. But if he did the 16K and then he did a light join and then he went back to the 16K, he also did something else. He would finish like on a 12, not finish, but he would go to a 12K, and before going to the 16K, he would join also. And he swore up and down that this left him with a much smoother edge. So, the way things go in this world, he may have been doing those things and then he had that result, but those things may not have been responsible for that result. They could have been, I don't know. But there was a premise there that I was like sort of willing to entertain as being like, you know, logical, whatever, valid. I mean, it's always, if you want to do it, it's fine. It's valid because you want to do it. It's just honing. There's no honing police going to bust you for joining an edge, but it's when people tell me, oh, you got to join your edge, and it's like, that's happy horse shit. You don't have to do that. You just don't. Right? I'm not an edge joiner, and I shave very well. I seriously doubt the people who promote edge joining shave any better than I do. They probably post more on forums and groups than I do, though. So, and that's what really matters in this world, right? Your post count, your likes, your thumbs up, Facebook friends. That's the real stuff, right? Anyway. So I'm here doing this, and I'm watching my feedback, and I'm doing my slight roll. And it's a little tricky with these blades because they're flighty. I mentioned that in the last video. It's real easy to flip this straight up onto its edge. You kill all your work. So torque on these, you kind of have to have some good muscle memory. And you also have to have good concentration. Well, I do. That's what works for me. But you can see I have some pretty good undercut. Well, to be fair, I'm honing a little too fast to accurately judge undercut. It's just that I know my undercut. I don't have the undercut I want all the way up at the toe though. Somebody mentioned the ASMR thing in the last video in the comments, and you know, I totally I get into that because I lose myself in the rhythm, in the cadence, the audible. Almost like playing an instrument in a way. I'm lowering my angle to the stone because I really want to see what's going on with the undercut up at the toe. Funny thing is I don't have the undercut up in that last centimeter that I would really like to see there, but the feel is good. So the tactile feedback is one read. The visual read up at the toe it's not quite there. It's getting there. I think part of the problem with this blade, even though it's a Swede and even though it's a frame back, I think the grind is a little off. You'll notice that I'll run the stone not down to dry, but I'll really run out the water on top because I'm really still looking to use as much grinding power of the stone as possible. Water is good, helps carry away swarf, blah blah blah, but it's also a lube, so it's also a friction reducer, which isn't really all that helpful when I need to use the 1K to its max. You have to be careful when you do that, because you can embed swarf into the stone, slow it down, lose cutting power. The solitude that I get when it's quiet in the house and it's just me and the stone and a blade. It's kind of intoxicating. I'm going to go slow here. Watch the toe. I don't know if you could see how the undercut, the swarf, was coming up onto the blade. It shoots up. Let me see if I can force it. Okay, right up into here. And then over here. I'm getting like little mushroom clouds. Like little nuclear bombs going off. I have a lot of it down by the heel. So much so that it just looks like a lot of undercut. You can't really see it all that clearly when you have a lot of water on the stone. Undercut is best judged with less water on the stone and at a slower speed. I tell you, I don't have the edge where I want it. I was kind of hoping I would be there. So I'm going to cut here. I think I'm going to need a couple of more 1K sessions to bring this salvage bevel into working condition. Anyway, so that's enough for now then. Alright, we're back. Went through a couple of mini sessions on this 1K with this blade to get the feedback, visual and tactile, where I wanted it. So, see, I have a little slurry up on the stone right now. It's not necessary, it just happens to be there from lapping. So what happened was, is I came back, I got away from it, I came back to it again, and I already achieved what I was looking for, but I just walked through that door. All right, do you follow? I just arrived, I just got there. So I'm going to do a little insurance. Make sure there's no hidden surprises waiting. You know, when you have a blade like this that had a lot of rot, a lot of pitting, a lot of devil spit, you know, you really want to like make sure before you progress that everything is where it's supposed to be. All right? Because what can happen is if you're not paying attention, you're not constantly looping the bevel, some pitting might show up. Might have been like, you know, in the subsurface or something, hidden. Could have been a microscopic pit that is now blossoming into a full-blown pit. Anything can happen. So I'm going to show you, I did a grip change when I was really working on the toe. I don't know if you notice I do that. I back the blade off the stone and I'm focusing up here, right? So one of the things I'll do is, see this finger? I told you before, I mentioned earlier that it's easy to tip these forward when you're doing torque. And I meant it. It's for real. The geometry, the style of this blade lends itself to that, so you have to be careful. By putting my finger here, right, it's sort of a preventative measure, and it also allows me to focus my pressure within the torque, like justify it a little bit more towards the toe. Don't practice this with your beautiful Dovo collector's item or your Boker with gold wash or whatever. Get a junker blade like I did here and practice this stuff with those blades. So in case you actually do screw up and rotate forward and you bang the apex, who cares? It's learning. You don't want to do that to, you know, limited edition whacker or something, no. And if you did, it wouldn't be the end of the world, because it's just a razor. But now I have the violent feedback that I was looking for. And between that and the feel, I'm confident I have a good apex. I'm confident that my bevel faces meet the way they're supposed to, and that I don't have any hidden surprises. So what's the next step? Well, there's going to be a couple of next steps, and we're not going to cover them all in this video. So the first thing I want to do is I want to clear my 1K. I want to put that over here to dry, standing up on its end on an angle. Now I got this out. This is already prepped. What's that? 2K. I don't use this stone a lot for razors. It's good though in a case like this where you're doing major healing. If you think about honing, what you're doing is scratching the steel. All right? People want to get cute on forums and, oh, it's polishing, it's not honing. Screw all that bullshit. All right? All honing, all sharpening. All you're doing is scratching the steel. That's it. Doesn't matter if it's 12K or 1K. The reason we call like 12K work polishing is because the scratches are fine and they're close together, so you wind up with a mirror polish. Okay? But it's still the same process. All right? The wear mechanism is identical. The grain size, however, is not. So anyway, so we have the blade, and I'm going to dunk it a little bit. And I've rinsed it off. But look, see that? It's residue from the 1K. So if you don't want cross-contamination, you got to make sure you're working with a clean blade. So, clean. So I got the 2K out. Now some people use this for setting bevels. For me, it's too soft for that. It will naturally, under pressure, add a hint of convexity to your bevel face. Especially if you've been working on it. Because the more it gets saturated, the softer it gets. But it's a pretty good stone. It's pretty consistent. I use it mostly for tuning up kitchen knives. Now, to be honest, I don't need a 2K edge in the kitchen ever for anything. I'm not a chef. I just need to cut potatoes, carrots, stuff like that. Anyway, yeah, I don't do anything fancy, so I don't need like high polish edges. And I don't have good technique, so I beat my edges up, so it just goes on and on and on. But I keep this out for that because I own it, and I don't want to get rid of it. And because it has this nice, what do you want to call it, personality trait. When I've gone through a lot of early work with coarse stones and this and that, I told you about the particle size thing before. If you have a 14K, 1K, excuse me, if you have a 14 micron 1K, you're going to have like possibly, 20, 25 micron rogue particles in there, and you were actually honing on something even coarser than that, so you're going to have like boulders under the blade. You're going to have like some gouges. And they can be difficult to see, even under a loupe. I can just assume they're there because it makes sense. I don't need to go get my microscope to prove it, because that's the way the stones are. So I accept those realities and I act accordingly. So when I had a lot of early work on coarse stones, I tend to want to jump from the 1K to the 2K. That close hop minimizes the particle size difference to some degree. Relatively so, if we're talking about, I could have, jumped to, a 4K or 5K or a 6K. So this is a smaller jump. And there's a lot to be said for smaller jumps. People in the forums will tell you, oh, you can just go 1K, 5K. And you can if you work your ass off on the 5K. But you're asking a lot of the 5K to clean up the 1K. In this case, I was asking a lot of the 1K to clean up the 600. And the 600 was being asked a lot of to clean up, the 120. So at this stage, I want maximum healing. Those scratches we put into the steel with the abrasive in the stone. The results, we call them striations. When you look through a loupe, you see those lines. That's from scratching. If you look more closely on the higher magnification, you see a wild pattern. You see all types of gouges and scratches. The idea is to minimize that. Because when the two faces of the bevel intersect to make the apex, if you have gouges on both sides, and the gouges are all over the place, it's kind of like taking two combs, tilting them towards each other, and where the teeth meet, that's your edge. If all the teeth are very, very fine, that edge is fine. If the teeth are all over the place, or one side has thicker teeth, the resulting line is not so nice. So here we are working with two fixed surfaces that have been honed on identical abrasive, but maybe might have some differences in rogue scratches and direction and whatever. So we want to heal. Honing is healing. And I like to stay on this 2K for a while. See, it's not really loading. It's not embedded. But there was a lot of swarf up there. And it is on the surface, and it can interrupt your uniformity. So you do want to try and clean your stone. Something else I have been bad about on camera, that I'm very good with actually when I hone off camera, is rotating the stone back and forth. So I put wear on both sides, or similar wear. See, now that all that swarf is off the stone, feedback is totally different. For the most part, the feedback on the 2K Shapton Pro, this one, it's pretty smooth. Gets a little bit of a bumpy feeling. Usually that tells me it's time to give it a quick lap. But you don't get a lot of really loud, when I say loud, I mean, easily discernible feedback like you would get with a Naniwa 1K. It's quieter than that. Because this stone is a little softer, it is prone to wear more easily than like the 1K Chaucera or the 1.5K. So that's something to be aware of when honing if you're using pressure. Well, honing period, but if you're using pressure, you wear faster. Laws of physics. So we're back to that sort of dry, crisp, smooth type of feedback. So understanding done on this stone, feedback-wise, it's a little different than the Chaucera or the 1.5K because effectively it's a quieter stone. So this is why when people ask me about honing and I tell them, Send the wife or the girlfriend to the mall, put the cat out, turn the radio off, turn the TV off, shut the door, put your phone away. Hone and feel. Hone and listen. Don't put distractions in your way. If you do, you'll be one of those guys on the internet asking every time they hone. They don't understand what's going on. Because they're trying to learn how to hone in the middle of a Normandy invasion. All right. Honestly, right now, I feel done on this stone. Do a couple more insurance laps. See, I got a roll going on. I'm doing some heel leading. Working different parts of the blade, working on the tip, and then bringing the tail in. Well, heel. So on and so forth. All right, we're good. Let me put my little buddies back here for the closing shots. Closing credits. Anyway, there's going to be one more video. I'm just not sure what it's going to be. I may do a J-Nat finish going bow tan all the way through. I may do the early stages and then just show the finish. I'm not sure yet. All right. I figure as long as I'm doing this as a project, I might as well do it with you guys so we can all see this together. I can air out, like, you know, my mindset. Maybe it's helpful. If it's not, well, maybe the next video will be helpful. Anyway, look at that little penguin footprints. Anyway, not so much. Anyway, so listen, I'm having fun. You should be having fun. If you're not having fun, figure out what you're doing wrong, because this is supposed to be all about having fun. Until next time, take care. Talk to you soon.